Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday evening edition of Meet the Atheist. It's given me great pleasure to welcome to our show today one of the atheists that I'm sure everybody's familiar with. Hemant, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dean.
Yeah, it's been. I was so taken, when you said that you would agree to the interview. Like I said to you earlier, I'm having serious fanboy moment here. Where I'm going like, damn, I've been following this person for so long online, and here we are finally having a conversation.
That's very sweet.
Yeah, I guess let's just jump straight into it.
Yeah.
I want to, let's talk a little bit about you and your journey from belief through to atheism. Did you grow up in a religious environment at all?
Yeah, I grew up in a religious family, not a traditional religion. The religion is Jainism, Jain, smaller Indian religion. They believe in the supernatural. They also believe in nonviolence. So as far as like the spectrum of harmful religions go, this one's on the low end of it.
Right.
But they, like I said, they do believe in some supernatural stuff. So when I was like 13, 14 years old, and I started questioning these ideas for the first time about supernatural belief, heaven, hell, God in general. Mind you, the internet was relatively new. And so we're talking, it's not like there are online communities, much less even decent websites, but you could find some content here and there. But I realized that as I found atheism, people writing about atheism online, maybe I wasn't familiar with the word, but whatever they were saying, it seemed to make a lot of sense. And so it didn't take long for me to realize, I don't remember if the word atheism was one I identified with, but I realized I don't think I believe in God. And it wasn't my religion I didn't believe in, it was religion, period. And so that's kind of my foray into religion. And I then, as I'm sure is true with a lot of atheists, especially people watching something like this, the more you realize, wait, I don't think this makes sense, then you start to read up on it a little more or listen to it, hear people talk about it. And it's like, oh, yep, all of that still tracks. And so, yeah, the more I learned about it, the more I realized, yeah, this is what I feel is most correct.
Right. And what was that journey like for you? Was it a gradual process, or was there just one day the clouds parted and you saw that the sky was empty?
Yeah. I mean, it seems weird, but I think I do remember like one night when I was just like, all right, I'm not going to pray before I go to bed. Let's see what happens. And then I woke up and it's like, nope, no scars, no lightning. I'm good. And if, I want to say it happened gradually because it took a while for me to accept it. But in terms of just letting go of that idea, it happened pretty quickly. I mean, honestly, it was probably the span of a few weeks where I went from questioning things to realizing, no, I'm clearly on one side of this fence now, and it's a different side. But I didn't get to explore it because, again, what resources were available at the time? The answer was not many. And the ones that I had available looked like shady websites written by dudes living in their basements. I'm kind of jealous that there are so many TikTokers, YouTubers, podcasters now, because, I mean, I'm sure some of those people existed, but not a lot, and I didn't have access to them. So a lot of it was kind of internal until at least college, when I could start exploring things a little more in person. And even then, I didn't get involved in anything until after college, and I didn't start doing anything myself until after that.
I still remember going to the library to look up reference work. So
yeah.
It's a different era now. It's the Wild West era.
Yeah, for better and for worse, because there's a lot of bad content out there that I'm not a fan of. But in terms of just straight up trying to find other people whose messages or videos or whatever I connect with me, there's a ton of people out there. There are, I mean, and we joked about this before going live, but I came up in this atheism thing before all the new atheist stuff happened.
Yeah.
But to the point that there are voices out there who are not just older white academic men. I mean,
Right.
there are more people you can connect with and who are speaking your language and who know how to make things make sense to you personally. It's like, that's wonderful. I mean, that's something that just wasn't out there, at least in big numbers.
Right. And what was the straw that broke the camel's back for you? What was the, what was the influence? Was it just your desire at learning more, or did you encounter something that was contradictory, or what can you actually identify the straw that broke the camel's back?
There was not one straw. It honestly was my family had just moved to a different state. I had to kind of start over, make new friends, do everything. And at the time, that was the worst possible thing that could happen. But what that did, it's not that I said, oh, well, God doesn't exist. It's that I started asking myself for the first time, why would God allow this to happen if it was so terrible? And what that did is it started me questioning all sorts of things about religion. How come if my religion is true, no one else seems to know what the hell I'm talking about? If it's true, what about these logical contradictions? Because even if you know nothing about Jainism, it believes in a heaven and hell and karma and reincarnation and things like that. And those are things that when you're not just accepting it, but trying to figure out the logic behind it, questions come up. And if you start asking those questions, you realize you have stepped into like Atheism 101, because those are the questions everyone has about religion, wherever they're coming from. So it wasn't just one thing, but it was realizing, oh, I do have questions about this. I'm not getting good answers from people within the religion. And when you go online, to the extent that it was out there, it's, oh, there are other people who have wondered the same things, and they seem to have figured this out. The way they explained it, it's like, I'm not telling you to join my religion. I'm saying religion itself doesn't make any sense. Here's why. It's like, oh yeah, this dude or whoever it was always a dude. They make a lot more sense, and they've thought through it, and everything they're saying tracks with the way I'm thinking about it. And again, it didn't take much for me to realize, I think it's okay to just say I don't buy into any of this.
It's if you've ever heard the expression "a death by 1,000 cuts," it's something along those lines.
Right. And the more you learn about it, you realize it just solidifies. It's kind of like learning about evolution and stuff too. It's not just one thing. It's when you just keep amassing all this evidence, what other conclusion is there?
Exactly.
The more I learn about it, the more I write about it now and talk about it now, I feel pretty comfortable being an atheist at this point.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about activism. I see you are involved with a lot of work on college campuses, and are you just tell us a little bit about your activism and how you manifest that in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I don't do as much of it now, but the way I came up in the movement, big quote hands, is that I was on campus. I was at college. I wanted to start a group for atheists. What I didn't realize at the time is, there's like a national organization that is literally trying to do that. So I became involved with that. That's the Secular Student Alliance. They are still going strong today. But I became a part of their board of directors. I became the chair of their board. I worked with them for a really long time. I like what they do still. But that's kind of one way I grew up in that world of activism. Through that organization, I realized, there are groups trying to get a footstep in Washington, D.C. and trying to influence laws. And that's the Secular Coalition for America. They're also still going strong, but I became involved with them. Over the course of the years, I also worked with a group trying to harness the charitable contributions of atheists, saying it's not that we're less generous than religious people, but we don't have a vehicle like church to give money.
Less organized,
Yeah, and so I was involved with that too. These days, I don't work with organizations so much. I kind of just do
Mm,
my own thing. I write about the issues that I care about.
mm,
But writing about those issues means figuring out what are various
yeah,
atheist groups doing in these issues. And a lot of it's political. So the question is, well, are they trying to influence the legislation? Are they
mm,
speaking out
mm,
for or against it? And I want to
mm,
make sure I want to be aware of what they're working on, because it
mm,
turns out a lot of what it means to be an atheist activist, at least in the United States these days, is pushing back against
yeah,
what Christians, conservative Christians, are doing politically.
right. No, exactly. The thing is, we always have this idealized version of what an activist is in our heads. We see these people chained to bulldozers and
Right,
people
right.
on submarines, protesting, and we have this idealized, romanticized idea of what it means to be an activist. But I mean, activism can be something as simple as being a voice in your community, and
Sure.
standing up for your principles.
And one
So,
thing that has definitely changed over the past like 10, 20 years is that what used to be atheists were alone fighting, religious intrusion into schools and government and all that. And these days, honestly, there are so many progressive religious groups that are fighting the same fight. Because if, for example, if you're a Jewish person, devoutly religious, but you support church state separation, guess what? Natural allies on that front. We can save the religious uh, arguments and debates. That seems almost lower priority because we're still fighting, both of us, for church state separation. That is true of a
exactly,
lot of religious groups as well.
yeah,
So I find myself uh, uh, listening to or working with, and my friends who are activists who are working with a lot of progressive religious organizations, because that seems to be where the energy is at.
right.
And the fighting about God and God belief is so much lower on my list of
It's
priorities.
a
Yeah.
secondary priority. What's the saying? You guys, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah, in a
sometimes,
sense.
sometimes you have to get in bed with the devil. They say.
I mean, I get what you're saying, absolutely. But the fact is, like, what is it that we're not even enemies when it comes to some of those
Exactly.
progressive religious groups,
Yeah.
because it's like, yeah, you believe in God, but the way you believe in, and we can argue about that because I think you're wrong. But at the end of the day, if those religious groups are saying, I'm inspired by my faith to fight for religious freedom, church state separation, my right to believe how I want to believe,
Yeah.
I don't have any issue with that. Again,
Yeah.
the argument of what exactly you believe and why you believe it, I disagree with. I'm sure a lot of people watching this do too. But at the end of the day, don't we want religious freedom? If I'm sure you and I disagree on a bunch of things, but in terms of what we're passionate about, there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the overlap. And the funny thing is, there are a lot of religious not religious. There are some atheist groups or individuals out there that are so inspired by trying to get people to stop believing in God that they metaphorically get in bed with a lot of really strange right-wing
Yeah.
groups that ultimately hurt church state separation. I don't get it at
Yeah.
all. Doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah. No, it's true. And it's ironic that people who pride themselves on their critical thinking skills have such a big blind spot.
Yeah. Or they're willing to overlook those blind spots because they think they want to go back like 15, 20 years to when people were debating God's existence. And like, the thing is, the resources are out there. The debates are on video now. You can go watch that. The rest of us have moved on to
Yeah.
other more pressing issues. And some people are so like, oh, but I missed that. That's nice. Go back there, stay there.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
rest of us are trying to fight for opposing religious intrusion into all these
Yeah.
public spaces. Where are you guys? Oh, they're still stuck watching videos of like Richard Dawkins circa 2007.
It's true. The funny thing is that my personal view is that religion is an imposition. It's an imposition on our freedoms, on our liberties, on the way that we express ourselves. And the second you give an inch of slack on that on that tug of war, they will pull you 5 meters across the line. You know,
and
so
I agree with you. I would take one exception to that. I would say religion can be all of those things, and yes, let's fight against that. But sometimes we have to recognize that our biggest allies to fight that battle may be other religious people who are fed up with the way a lot of people are using it. And so it's like, all right, well, on that front, let's work together and push back. Because for example, the progressive Baptists who are supportive of church-state separation, the amount of things I disagree with them on, it's not that it's not important, but it's like, those are things that we can hash out privately. Not even privately, we could do it publicly, but it's not of great importance in the grand scheme of things. So
got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So what about the impact of religion? What has it had on your life? You know, we've had here in the African continent especially, we have horror stories of people just taking it to the extremes. There are cults where people starve, you know, the whole congregation, and, you know, waiting for Jesus to descend from the mountain. And then we also have the extremist Muslim side of it here on the continent as well. If you look to countries like Mozambique, where there's a big cell of extremists, and then obviously in the Western Central Africa as well. Did religion have a negative impact on your life growing up, or?
I mean, on my life personally, I would say no. Not that now that I've heard so many stories from other people who grew up in religion, my stories pale in comparison. And Jainism, again, I have said this before, but like, even when Sam Harris wrote The End of Faith, where he talks about how religious extremism is bad, but moderate religion provides them cover, he even gave a shout out to Jainism as like a good religion, which was funny in that context. But I mean, I grew up in a religion where people would fast for long periods of time. They would encourage children to fast. And I've seen horror stories of what happens when children fast for that long, even within the context of Jainism. Did it impact me personally in that way? No. I mean, by and large, the Jains I grew up with are not extremists in any serious sense that people would think like, oh, that's crazy. Or maybe I have a blind spot to it. I don't know. But no, I mean, most of the time for the past however long I've been doing what I do, talking about this, writing about this, the worst aspects of religion are not things that affected me personally. They are things that other people have dealt with or are dealing with. And I feel like my contribution to all this is that I can shine a spotlight on what's going on with them and try to get other people upset and angry about this stuff, because they should be.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so important what you, what you say there, because a lot of religions, we always think of damage in terms of physical damage, but the emotional scarring and the emotional torment that people go through leave lasting psychological impacts. And I mean, to this day, after all these years, I still catch myself in these moments where I say, damn that religious upbringing, you know, it's making me think in this sense, you know, or it's affecting my behavior or my attitude to something in that sense, you know. So I think
and there are so many people online who talk about the struggle of deconstructing, because you have to rewire your brain in a sense to stop thinking
but
that way.
It's a trauma, you know. You have to cope with leaving religion as you would cope with serious trauma. And there's a period that you go through where you start rationalizing things, and then you go through grief.
Well,
and
it's
then,
like,
you know, like
it's like breaking up with a partner after like 15, 20 years, or going through a divorce, where it's like, okay, I had to do that. I feel like it's the right step for me, but I have to rethink the way I do everything, because I'm so used to doing it this way or thinking about it this way. And maybe the way that person treated me, I got used to it. And now that I can take a step back, I realize how wrong it was. But then you got to give yourself permission to think that way, because you were never allowed to for so long. I mean, yes, it is a long process. And for some people, it is harder than others. And that is why I'm so grateful that there are so many voices out there who can,
and resources.
I mean, and not only resources, but maybe you can connect with this as well. When I became an atheist, if there were resources at all, they were resources saying why you shouldn't believe in God and here's why atheism makes sense, things like that. What is very interesting today is that if I'm leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses or leaving Mormonism or name your religion, you will find online communities, YouTubers, TikTokers who can speak about what it means to leave that religion specifically because they know the details. They know exactly what you're going through in a way. And I'm not even trying to slam him on this. Dawkins, just to name a famous atheist, Dawkins doesn't get it because he didn't grow up in the Jehovah's Witnesses. He could speak to it from a distance, but if you are leaving one particular religion like that, it means so much more when you can listen to someone who also grew up in it and left it. And that's what's been spreading these days. It's not one person who says religion is wrong. It's the ex-Scientologist. It's the ex-Orthodox Jew who says, no, I've been there. I know exactly what struggles you are having when you were trying to walk away from religion. Here's organizations, nonprofits I could point you to who specifically help people who are leaving this religion. That's stuff that has sprung up over the past few years that didn't exist for a while. And that makes such a huge difference.
It does indeed. So how did your family and your circle of friends react to this new atheist Hemant?
Yeah, I didn't tell my parents for a long time. When I did, their bigger concern is, well, what sort of person are you now? Yeah. Less about the religious label and more like, well, what about everything we taught you growing up about, trying to be a good person, all the values. And I think once they figured out the values had not changed, it's like, okay, it's still weird. We still don't talk about it, but they didn't kick me out of the house or anything. We have a good relationship now, but it's kind of predicated on us never discussing it. I mean, if you ask, I don't think my family knows what I do. I mean, if you, not that they're not aware I'm an atheist or that I do this stuff online. It's that if you ask them, like, so what do I do all day? They don't really understand, but it's fine. It's as good as it's going to get. And by and large, my friends who I'm close to this day anyway, it's not something that comes up, not because I don't talk about it, not because they never ask about it, but because it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. If we get together, we're talking about family, friends, other things like that, sports, whatever. And we're not talking about religion. It just doesn't come up.
Yeah. It does tend to, you find yourself after a couple of years having, you're thinking to yourself, hey, wait a minute, I've had this conversation like 20 times already before.
It's very much like atheism is my online life, and offline, I talk about it with nobody because the people in my life just don't care. And I'm not going to bring it up.
So let's talk a little bit about some misconceptions. What are some of the misconceptions that, because we are the favorite villain in the Christian play, there's some way out there misconceptions, and then there's some more insidious ones. For example, the claim that we are amoral or that we are promiscuous because we don't have divine supervision and some form of check. We don't live our lives with a checklist. What are some of the misconceptions that you've encountered?
Yeah, I mean, you've nailed all of those, that we're not generous, that we don't give to charity, that we don't help other people. I mean, again, I guess my first question to anyone who believes that stuff is, what would it take to convince you you're wrong about that? I could point you to studies that say atheists are just as generous. I could show you organizations where atheists are doing volunteer work and all that sort of stuff. Will it actually matter? I don't know. In terms of another misconception, one I have seen a lot of is you will see people, Christian right advocates, basically saying, we need to do everything we're doing. We need to push our religion because atheists are trying to cram their religion down your throat. And I can tell you from experience, I've been around atheists in closed door settings, and it's like, I promise you that's not what they talk about behind closed doors. I can tell you that when you talk about groups like the Freedom from Religion Foundation that file lawsuits about this stuff, they're never saying we want, football coaches to push atheism on kids. We want a motto that says, in God we do not trust. No, what they're always asking for is neutrality. It's never going in the other direction. If atheists did the things that conservative Christians do, maybe they would have a right to be angry about it. But the difference is we're just playing defense while they're playing offense. And they seem to think, nope, they're just doing the same things we're doing on the other side. That's a lie. That's not what happens at all. So, I mean, that's another misconception that I'm literally writing a piece about that for tomorrow. I mean, it comes up all the time where you have religious zealots saying, we have to do this thing because atheists are already doing it. It's like, no, we are not. Again, I think people have a problem with realizing that neutrality puts us all on an even playing field. And they want to argue that when you talk about religious neutrality in schools, they made up a term for it. They're saying, well, neutrality isn't really that. It's pushing the religion of humanism on children. It's like, nope, we just said teach science or teach math, or you just don't proselytize. I mean, so they've taken neutrality to be, a 180 from where they are. It's not.
It reminds me of one of George Orwell's books where he wrote, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Right. Yep. And that's the fear that these people are saying, well, if religion is neutral and the U.S. Constitution says there's, no religious test and we have freedom of religion, well, then that means Christians should be allowed to do whatever they want and you can't stop us. It's like, that's not how the rules work. That's not what the rule book says.
Not how that work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in conclusion, Hemant, any positive aspects that you have, or that moment when you recognize, fuck, I've grown personally, like I see there's some growth in me. Any positive aspects or growth since leaving religion? How has your life changed?
I mean, I've changed as a person. I'm not the same person I was a few years ago, but that's a good thing. One thing I have seen a lot of is, I feel like 20, 25 years ago when all this stuff really started taking off online, there was a question, at least in my head, I felt like I saw it in other places, of why aren't more people atheists? Don't they see the world that I'm seeing? And the amazing thing is, in the time since then, every survey that comes out about religion shows that more and more people are leaving organized religion. I mean, they may not call themselves atheists, but they are leaving organized religion. And why are they doing it? Yes, because they're questioning God the same way a lot of us left religion, but also because of so many self-inflicted wounds, where whether it's the treatment of LGBTQ people, which, by the way, there are plenty of atheists who are anti-trans these days, which is frustrating. There is how do you handle sexual abuse within your communities? Things like that pushes a lot of people away from organized religion. So in that sense, I see that as a huge victory for something a lot of atheists were working toward decades ago, and that is happening. And the thing is, it's bittersweet because it's like they're not becoming atheists. They may still believe in God, but they don't buy into organized religion anymore. I see that as a huge shift in the right direction, even if they're not necessarily on my team.
We'll take it. Take it.
By the way, I did see questions pop up and I didn't have a chance to read any of them, but I'm happy to go through any of those.
Sure. I just want to be mindful of your time as well. So we'll take these two questions, and then we can wrap this up. Chris Stephen asks, is there a danger of sects of atheism becoming radical or cult-like? Think back to something like the Inner Circle atheists, who to a large extent were trying to create a pseudo-religious atheist clergy.
There's two questions there, and they're both interesting. I don't know what you're referring to, Chris, when you talk about the Inner Circle atheists or atheist clergy. I mean, there are groups that will certify humanist chaplains. It's not a bad thing. They're chaplains, counselors, those are good things, and we need more of them. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about or something else. In terms of can atheists become radical or cult-like, I mean, sure, in a sense. I've seen people who are like, I'm purely dedicated to reason and critical thinking, and then where that takes them. I mean, I feel like I see this here. With like the Dawkins anti-trans crowd, where they use critical thinking or being a rational thinker as justification for a bunch of really dumb ideas and bigoted ideas. And listen, they get pushback from atheists as much as everyone else too. But like, it seems that it's fully possible to call yourself a critical thinker, a rationalist, whatever synonym you want to use, and then just come to the dumbest conclusions, and then become so stubborn that you can't see the other side because you've convinced yourself it's the rational way to think. That could happen. That is happening in a lot of ways. So yeah, in that sense, sure. There's no atheist. There's no like atheist pope. There's nothing. I haven't seen it in practice where it's like I'm an atheist and I want to force that on everyone else. No, it's not a parallel with religion in that sense. But it is possible that you just think, well, I'm an atheist. I'm right about one thing. Therefore, I have to be right about everything. It's like, no, there's plenty of dumb atheists out there too. They're still right about God, but that doesn't mean they're right about everything.
At the end of the day, Hemant, you'll get radical gardeners, people who want to take gardening to an extreme, where they want to plant green trees in every single hook and cranny of the office building, and it must be covered in vines, and then they're happy. So that you can get extremism, I think, in every single walk of life. It's
right. And the thing is, I mean, I would hope that if you're an atheist and you became an atheist because you were like, I looked at the evidence, it didn't make any sense, I explored this, I came to this conclusion. I would hope that people who are atheists because of that would use those same principles on everything else. But I have found there are plenty of atheists out there who are equally as stubborn and refusing to do that homework when it comes to other issues. And by the way, sometimes strategically, if it comes to how do we convince other people to, self-reflect about religion, come to different conclusions about God, that is an art. That is not a science necessarily. Yeah. We kind of joke that, or at least I've joked about this with some people, you can't just show Christians a list of biblical contradictions and say, see, there you go, God doesn't exist, the Bible's silly. That's not going to convince most of them. You have to find a way to do it. And again, I've called out sometimes atheists who I feel have done really dumb things to win hearts and minds. Whether it's like, well, I'm going to, for example, I'm going to burn a Bible or desecrate a holy book because I don't think there's anything special about it. And I do understand why they feel like, see, I can burn a flag because this is a symbol and it holds no special value. And I do understand like the free speech, there's no false idols sort of rhetoric behind that. But it's like, who are you trying to convince here? Because if anything, you're going to piss off religious people and people will just see you as some crazy dude on the internet. Is it? And again, it's like, tactically speaking, is that helpful? No, I don't know what you're trying to win over here, even though I agree with you in principle that there's nothing special about it. So again, does that make them a radical atheist? No, it doesn't. It just means atheists can still do things that are not necessarily wise. And we can be wrong about things. Again, being right about
aligned,
being right about one important question, which we are, doesn't mean you're going to be right about everything. And I think atheists as a whole, whatever loose community you want to talk about, we need to be willing to call our own people out and say, yeah, but you're wrong about this other thing.
Yeah, amazing. Hemant, on behalf of our audience here, I just want to say thank you so much for being so incredibly generous with your time.
Sure.
For meeting with us. Where can people find you on social media? Just tell us where we can view some more of your content.
The easiest way is to go to friendlyatheist.com. That's the place where I do my writing. That's where you'll find, you could sign up for free. Everything there is free. If you're on YouTube right now, you could type in Friendly Atheist. You'll find my channel, like, subscribe, do all the things.
I'll link to those in the description.
Awesome. And if you search for my name, which is right there on the Google, you'll find the other social media accounts too.
Amazing. Keep fighting the good fight, Hemant. We'll see you out there.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Bye.
Bye.